pleasure of introducing Matthew, but a couple housekeeping. Competition entries, if you have them, please get them in. I think we have a dozen or so, but also if you haven't voted for it, please go by. If the voting is done in the app, we're trying to make it a little more convenient for you guys, so please vote for them. And first time at RTC? Fantastic. You've never been to a gala dinner. They're not giving away, mouse pads and thumb drives for winning this competition. It's serious stuff if you want to really inspire people with what's in front of you shown, so you see that. So please go by, vote for the competitions. Session surveys, yeah, the speakers really want to know how they stay on top of things, how they make it better. And we want to know how the speakers are doing, so please do that as well. The wrap-up session is moving up today, so it's actually starting at 4:15. So don't skip the wrap-up to go to get ready for dinner tonight. It's a good way, it's a good bookend to the end of the week. We started on a high point with Ashra, so please come to the wrap-up session. And then right after that, those are your speakers. The debrief will follow immediately after the wrap-up session. And if you guys do want anything in order, it's 2 hours from now time. They're still here. We're going to close that down or wrap it up this afternoon, but you want to get it in by 3 o'clock if you want something in order. So with regard to Matthew, if you saw the initial proposal when you signed up for this class, there was a different company name here. It's not uncommon that this happens, and it's something that if you're half my age or so, I turn 50 this year, I'll give you some advice. If you're entrepreneurial and if you're impatient, don't stick around. It's so much better to move up by moving out. If I tried to apply for a job at Autodesk a decade and a half ago, I wouldn't have gotten in. I went to the University of North Carolina. I'm not connected to anyone. You go into, I on a risk went to work with Revit Technology and then got into Autodesk and applied the side door. So, when you get out of school, you feel very intimidated about what are you going to do, and you don't have a lot of experience. Once you start to get that experience, if it costs more to replace you, that's what you should be getting paid. And if you go and ask them more because you've got an offer, and they say no, you go. You don't, actually, even if they give you a counter offer, don't stay. That goes for relationships. Oh, no, don't go. I can change. No. I'm not going to have that conversation. You go out, don't burn a bridge, and you'll come back in. If you go back in, you go start another company, and you get acquired, you'll come back in at a level that you could not have gotten to had you stayed. It's nothing personal. It's good business. And the reality is you're worth what it costs to replace you. And so they should just pay you that. And to the testament of that, Matthew was working for another firm. Between that time, he's now working here. We like having speakers that have that agility. You guys, being entrepreneurial, the difference of $10,000 a year today is worth retiring 10 years early. Okay, so it's not just about money, but you should take that seriously. So I applaud Matthew for not just staying at one firm and hoping things will work out. If you get another offer, you go. You look at the whole picture and you definitely go. So for us, we like having speakers that have this upward mobility. We like having delegates who have this upward mobility. Thank you for coming to RTC and hopefully adding to your resume of what's possible. And with that, please welcome Matthew.
Well, on that note, some great advice though, however, definitely take it to heart. So, as you mentioned, Matthew Claus, now at KSS, I was at HED in their Chicago office. I actually have 3 people from that office here. 2 of them I worked pretty closely with when I was there. Great firm. Nothing bad to say about them. I had a great time while I was there. And now I'm in KSS's Philadelphia office. We also have an office in Princeton. So a little bit about me. I'm a licensed architect, currently in Illinois. I'll be moving that over to Pennsylvania. About 5 years experience in both large and small firms. HED being the large side and now KSS being sort of the smaller side. Most of that experience has been in corporate interiors, obviously, some higher education, a little bit of housing, commercial work. I sort of like to be everywhere. I don't like to kind of just do one job type. I kind of like to be put in everything. And also, since I joined KSS, they have a digital design group which is responsible for implementing Revit best practices in the firm. We're also working with Parallax, Aaron Maller, who's developing content for us currently. If you need content, I highly recommend him. Does anybody know what this is? Hands? Hands? How many are there? Are there 4 of you? Did you get something if you know what it is? Who was it? I'm gonna just, Pokemon Go? Anybody know what that is? I got one more. Those are, I 3D printed those before I flew out here from Pennsylvania just because I'm nerdy and I like to do this kind of things. It is kind of amazing though. I mean, even if you don't like Pokemon, you have to kind of give it up to those guys for raising the Nintendo stock. So, class synopsis, obviously going to be talking about interior workflows. When I started HED, I had 0 experience in interiors. Before that, I was doing more commercial and some industrial work. But they had a great interiors team, but they were in need of catching up, I think is the best way to put it. So, leadership buy-in. These are kind of the things that I learned in my experience. What do your leaders want? What do you want? You want to be more efficient? Well, your leaders probably want to be more efficient too. A lot of things that people have been talking about in this conference are about being, about being efficient. From Dynamo, which I'm not going to be talking about, but it's a great place to get efficient. Do you want to spend more time on design? That was a big one for HED. They were using a workflow that was more about catching up with themselves and sort of, get the documents out, get the documents out, get the documents out. And they were losing some precious time on design. And then, do you want to be more competitive? Of course you do. You want to help others, you want to be a leader, influence decisions. I originally had, do you want to make more money on here? But I felt that was kind of obvious. And some of these lead to that. I'll put this up here. Don't let people tell you what you can't do. Ever. Especially with this group. Because I'm hoping that you've all seen that you can do amazing things. And it only takes one thing to kind of, have that explosion. And you keep going and going and going. 3 C's and a Q. This is actually something, I couldn't come up with anything more clever than that. This is something we're starting to develop at KSS right now. As they're in a growth period and they're trying to look at different facets of their practice. So communication, in terms of our Revit models and drawings, we need to be consistent with graphics. We need consistent legends. We need general notes that are consistent, symbols. Again, these kind of go into each other, but this consistency is a little different because we want people pulling consistent information. So typical details, common workflows throughout the office, naming conventions, organization of models and content and how you share that. And also content, building content. There was a huge data collection when I was at HED to get families because they were 5 offices. And I'm sure someone has their own little private library in here that they like to kind of hide away. So we had a big data collection that was for that purpose of saying, guys, where is all this stuff? We know you're making good stuff. Please, we want it for everybody. Because that just, if you help one person, you help another person, and it just goes, across the board. Tools, add-ins, always evaluating that sort of thing. I would say It's really important to evaluate this for your workflow because there are tools that do similar things, but depending on your office, they might work better, and depending on your office culture. Easy access to library, I'll talk a little bit about that later. And also quality. Who here has milestone reviews on every project? Yeah. There are a few hands, but we all get very busy. As technology gets better, we have to work faster, we have to deliver faster. So this has been a big hot topic. I've only been with KSS for like 2 months, but this has come up a lot since I've started there. They want more QA, QC. And it's not because they've gotten in trouble with anything or anything like that, it's just because they're in growth and they need to be reviewing their work because there's more hands in the pot. Model review, roundtable discussions. This is also one that I tried to do when I was setting up the interiors workflow at HED was if I added even something simple as like some new door families. I tried to get everyone together in front of a TV screen and say, hey look, here's these new families. You might not understand how I built them, but here's how they work. Just so people were aware, and it can be just those little things. If it's a symbol, it's something new for users. So I feel it's very important to kind of constantly bug them. You know, no one has time, I would try to make time. If it's like 5 minutes, hey guys, there's this new thing. Because sometimes an email is kind of, you know, like you get a lot of them, and then they get buried. So a little bit of face-to-face can go a long way. And I highlighted these, you know, these seem to be the most important in the beginning if you're starting like a new workflow, in my opinion. And some of them happen more over time. All right, legacy workflow. Anybody doing this?
No.
This is what what HED was doing when I originally got there. They had their AutoCAD, you know, they would be space planning. Usually the senior designer there actually did a lot of the space planning because she was, I'm not giving her enough credit, but she was incredible in the fact that you could give her a floor plan and she would just know. Like, she was done. In her head, she had already done it, but she figured it out. So she knew AutoCAD and she could kind of go in there and, you know, do that sort of thing. But there was this back and forth all the time. And it was really kind of slowing them down because they worked so fast. The first project I worked on was 4 weeks from start to finish. That was space planning to 100% CDs, 4 weeks. And I'm sure you all know that going back and forth a lot can kind of hurt that process. And then you're working at lots of hours and you get upset and yada, yada, yada. But then you also have inconsistencies. You know, you're showing a plan that you might have developed 2 days ago, and now you have to model in SketchUp, but then you made changes to the plan, but you don't have time to change the SketchUp model, so, you know, you can run into sort of that, you know, pitfall. Challenges. These are some of the early challenges that I ran into. Finishes, big one. Everything needed to be represented almost literal. And that was a big, that was tough for me, because I was coming from an architecture world where, I mean, not that architects don't do this, but the interior designers I worked with did it a lot more, and to a different degree. You know, if you had a herringbone finish, they wanted to see it, they wanted the exact tile size, they wanted to know the start point in the model, they wanted to see that, because everything moved so fast, construction moved fast, that they just don't have time. They don't have time to say, oh, you know, we showed a crosshatch, but really it's this herringbone, and then, you know, you've already defeated the purpose. Sheet specs. I was like, are you crazy? Where's your spec book? Do you even have like one page? No, all in the drawings. And this might be, I don't know if any of this is different other parts of the country or world, but most of my experience was in Chicago with this. So everything was on the drawings. You just submit the drawings. Furniture. There's a lot of furniture out there. A lot of furniture. I mean, even if you think how many different types of chairs you've seen in here. I mean, yeah, there's a lot. So somehow you have to account for that. And then, as I mentioned, speed. Very short time, very fast. Some of the solutions. For finishes, I was using Hatch 22. It used to be free, now you gotta pay for it. There's another Hatch, I think it's called Hatch Kit, which I have not used, but I like Hatch 22 a lot because I could draw the pattern in my model and create the hatches there. So I could actually see them as I'm building them and kind of like, you know, copy them over and tile them and make sure they're working before I actually go through the process of creating it. You can type this all out in sort of like code, but I didn't have time for that. Material library. This is an ongoing thing. Oh, and for the Hatch 22 thing, I should mention I've probably made about 50 hatches like the first month that I was there because, again, just like furniture, lots of different types of finishes, lots of different ways that you have to show them. Material library was, and is, I'm sure, an ongoing thing there. The out-of-the-box material library does not give, you know, very good materials for interiors. So we actually purchased some packs online and things like that. But one of the other things that we did is we called the manufacturer that we were specing. We said, "Hey, can you send us a high-def image of this finish?" Oh, we also wanted to tile. And you know, most of the time they would send it, and sometimes their website has it, but you know, it might be like this really small, like JPEG, and you know, you can't use that. You gotta have high quality. So I would encourage everyone, this goes for furniture too, talk to the manufacturers. Tell them. And if they don't have it, say, well, we're less likely to spec you next time. Honestly, some of them responded very quickly to that. Sheet specs, schedules, obviously, for finishes. I'll go into some of that. Large amounts of text and template. So this was basically when I started the first month, I basically opened their AutoCAD stuff and copy pasted it into a sheet because that's how I had to kind of get the job done. But I would encourage you, if this is how you do your work, review that with them. Because we found things, you know, it's my first interior project, so I'm reading through it, I'm trying to understand it, and there were some things that were outdated. Furniture mentioned, need for a robust library, and talking to manufacturers. Now, yeah, you're not always going to get the stuff from your manufacturers, even if you tell them that, like, hey, we're not expecting you. So I knew how to make families, so I became the guy that had to make the chairs and the tables and all that kind of stuff. If you have that person, please engage them and make them feel worthwhile. Because it does save a lot of time. If you model that thing once and you do it well, you don't have to do it again. It's just like, I remember CEO of HED was in our office one day and I brought up toilets. I was like, you know, people don't know that toilets are 18 inches off the face of the wall. And we're wasting a lot of time on that. So what we, you know, we added a line in the family. How much time? There's like 200 people, production people at that company. You magnify that over time, and all they have to do is a line. Oh my God! Like, it's simple things like that that you might take for granted that can really improve things. But don't let that be a substitute for teaching staff why it's 18 inches away. It can be dangerous. How else can Revit help? Counting of things. I don't like to do, you know, I still saw people there, they're like, 1, 2, 3, and then someone comes and talks to them and they're like, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I got an email. Where did I say? 1, 2. No one wants to do that. No one wants to do that. Use schedules, make your stuff smart. Count your workstations. Area plans helped. You know, in this counting of workstations I put up there, but it was a lot of different things. Sometimes we had to Sometimes it was seats, you know, it depended on the client of how they were kind of calculating their, you know, some clients had strict requirements for, there's only this many people in this department, you know, you can't, we're not adding anymore, you can't show anything else, it's gotta be specific. So then you get into like type marking things properly, things of that nature. This one kind of goes back to the workflow. You know, if you're in Revit, you can kind of do this stuff at the same time, unless you're doing some crazy post-production visualization. I try to keep everything in Revit as much as possible. Now, if you need like some ultra realistic rendering, well, you know, you might have to do some post-production. But for what we were doing most of the time, we could communicate well enough right out of the box. Schedules, built these into the template, you know, for finishes, equipment, toy accessories, blah, blah, blah. Coordination. Does anyone who does interiors have other disciplines in Revit, if they're using Revit already, that work with them? Wow, I'm actually happy to see that many hands. I don't know if we ever had one. I think we did when we worked in-house. Yeah, we had people, because it was a AE firm, and when there were some rare projects when we could, you know, be all in-house, and we were all in Revit, but it still can help though, because sometimes we would model, you know, we would just either do it in place and you just draw a circular duct that happened to be going through the space. Even that little bit of time spent can help you, because you then know more about the project than your consultant. Most of the time. Getting started. Efficiency, developer efficiency, and reuse. Don't do it once. If you need a chair, please don't model it in place. Make it a family, because then you can bring it in. Be consistent. That would go toward naming conventions, materials, things of that nature. Share your work. Don't squirrel it away in a library and not share it. Be critical. Focus on one thing at a time. That's a big one. And I'm guilty of not doing that so well sometimes. Because I remember when I started, it was like, oh God, you know, I gotta do these hatches, and I gotta make this furniture, and now I have to do the view templates, and what about the line styles? I don't know if this architecture setting that I took is what the interior guys want. But sometimes that can be helped, but try and focus on one thing. And always be positive. I got called over to desks a lot. And I know some of these guys deal with that still. And I still do in my new job. But I always try to be there, be supportive. Because I've been on the receiving end before of people coming over, and I call them over, and they sometimes are like, oh, I love you. God, you didn't know how to do view extents, man. Come on. No, be positive. You want to help your people. And trust me, your leaders will notice. There is no perfect project to start with. Has anyone had a perfect project to implement new workflow strategies on? Oh man, we gotta talk. Because I have never, and it definitely wasn't perfect for me, because I'd never done interiors before, and I'm sitting there like, oh my God, I'm relearning everything. Template. I'm not going to go into like too many specifics about, you know, here's how you create the template, here's how you change your line style. But is there an existing template? In my case, there was. I thought it was garbage. It's a lot better now. Some of these guys came after I started there, and you know, they kind of like brought all this young talent on and kind of like rock and rolled and got some things done. There was an existing architecture template, didn't work out for interiors, and I think they had tried before I had started there, and you know, they had like a bad taste in their mouth because it didn't have stuff ready for them. Heavy or light? And this is, again, might depend on your firm's philosophy behind some of this stuff. In terms of, do you want that template to open and it's got all this stuff in it? Like, it's got all the schedules, the sheets are set up, it's got plans already on sheets, and all your typical details you could ever need are in there, and then you're deleting stuff out? Or do you want it to be light, and you want either container files or you want to use Unify or some other family manager, and you want to pull stuff in. That's what I prefer. That's what those guys are doing. That's what we're doing at KSS now. So it's just, but it doesn't work for everybody, and it might depend on the size of your firm, if you have other disciplines, that sort of thing. Cartoon set, kind of mentioned that. I did build a separate template. I cartooned their set. They had a different naming convention to the rest of the firm, which has actually been since remedied. Location studio specific. I put this up there too because we also ran into, once I started developing these things, they wanted to share it, of course. But different parts of the country have different requirements, so just one thing to be aware of. What do you need? Documentation, workflow, and visual. New templates. Best way to get some immediate efficiency. Visibility graphics controls. Sorting your views in the browser. Huge. That way, if you get hit by a bus, someone else can work on the project. Or if you're sick, or life happens, or you have a baby, or you get married, or you go on some crazy vacation, these can really help because then it's consistent. And it's really easy to set. Some of these other things, they're going to happen, I would hope, forever. As times change, you're going to have new hatches, there's new finishes, your keynotes might change. Detailed components, you're always going to be kind of developing those. You should obviously have the standard ones of, 5/8 chip, I would hope. I've been places that didn't. Materials, obviously, will add over time. And that's when, and all these things are kind of connected. If you're adding materials, please pay attention to naming conventions. That sort of thing. And then once you do add that, maybe something needs to go to the intranet or wiki or whatever your firm or office might have. Maybe it's a lunch and learn. Maybe you need to present. Here, hey guys, here's all these new things that we added. Just some simple examples. This is sort of what we started with that I made just really quick, sort of limited, but at least these could be on every project and they would be consistent. Turning furniture off. We hatched millwork in plan differently than built casework. I don't want to set that every time that I work on a new project. And it got a little bigger over time. So any firm, but a lot of these are common. Collect all the things. Again, I just want to come back to this because data collection was really important for us when we went through this process. And this wasn't just from project architects or interior designers. It was from leadership. It was from design leaders, project managers. They're all involved in that process, and it's very important to get everyone's expectations on the table, I guess is the way to put it. So obviously, I'm sure lots of different people have lots of different ideas about what your rendering should look like. Some people want that final, rendered, ultra-realistic image. Some people don't. Some people want it to be very white and diagrammatic. Some people like people in their images. Some people don't. And a lot of this goes to, at least for us, was, again, the different offices. And I know those guys are still going through it. They're still sort of breaking everything down and finding the common place. Again, actually mentioned this earlier, but hidden library. Find it, get it, put it somewhere where everyone can use it. Don't be that person. Container files. This is one way that I've handled having a lightweight template. Is you just have another Revit file and you name it appropriately, and you put your details in it, you put your partition types in it, your schedules, your families, your groups, because then these can be shared with others. So if you have architecture and interiors, you can put both details in there. But at least your template then isn't set up for one person. It's not set up for, not one person, but one discipline. then you just bring those guys in. Then Unify. I really miss Unify. Oh my God. I'm almost begging KSS to buy it at this point. I've been there a short time, but I really miss it. This helped tremendously when we got it, to bring 5 offices using the same content. They're a little expensive. Tell them that. Maybe they'll kind of down a little bit. But if you ask these guys, I'm sure they'll tell you it was huge to bring in partition types, and across 5 offices across the country, everyone's automatically then using the same thing. And you can set up company-saved searches in here, so you can say door families. Here are the door families everyone should be using. If something's not in here, there's a content request. Goes to, we had BIM champions, we had champions in every office, goes to that group, they make the content, you get the pump back in here, you know it's good, then you get to use it. And we did have if you would scroll, I had more of this on here, there was a sandbox in there where any user could dump their stuff, so we don't want to cut people off. You have to have quality control, but you don't want to, you never know, you hire someone and all of a sudden they're making all this great content, but they're not part of the BIM champion group. But then, you can have them go to the depository one. I think, did they add schedules yet to be able to be put in? Anybody know?
No, we're gathering them into the template.
Okay. But there were some things that couldn't be put in here yet. I think legends and schedules might have been 2 big ones. I think we found a little bit of a workaround, but I know it's coming. All right. Let's talk about some project cycle stuff. You're starting with a template. You got a project. Yes. Got work. You should be experimenting in that project. Now, I remember saying that, and I got scared looks. Because I think when I said experimentation, they might have took it as I'm going to be spending a lot of time trying to get something else to work instead of actually documenting the work. But I think this is very important because every project you're going to learn things and every project's different. And then implementation. Then you take all that knowledge that you gain, you implement it, feed it back into the template. And then, then you start building in things like we would have meetings on, we got this new project. What might be an issue for our workflow? And there was all kinds of crazy things that came up. But I think it's very important to have that meeting beforehand and sort of say, it's not just, we're not just like into this. And then kind of mentioned testing ground, experimentation, lessons learned, very important. That's another part of the quality process that we're doing at KSS right now is sitting down afterwards and saying, hey guys, what went really well and what went really bad? Because both are very important. And it's not that you look at the bad and you're like, oh God, that person or this thing didn't really, it's important to know because then you share that with people. And then document new workflows. Seems to be that no one has time for this. But when it does happen, it does make a difference. Design options. Who likes design options? Who likes using design options? I don't really like how it functions, but it's there. We got to use it. Okay. Hopefully no one's doing this side as I talk about this. Hopefully everybody's doing this. What I mean is, I've been in models where someone says I need a design option, and they say, oh, we need to change these offices, we need to change the furniture over here, and then this lighting over here we need to change, and they put it all in one design option. You're like, oh, great. Well, I guess we're not going to value that against anything else we've already done. So, very important to be organized in that situation. Now, I just threw this together really quick, but, I've run into this sort of thing. I got one, I got two, now I got a break option. Oh, great, but now I can't see those two things together. The other thing about this is your schedules. Lighting alternatives. I don't think I worked on any interiors project where we didn't have a lighting alternative. We were always these two. Fluorescent, I think I spelled that one, didn't I? Fluorescent LED, we were always comparing those. And we needed to show them on our bid documents. So if you have this design option, you can set it to show that in a schedule. Nice. So don't do that one. And again, this allows you to mix and match your design options. Existing conditions. Has anyone gotten Revit files of existing conditions? Nice.
Did you have to pay for them?
Well, I hope you paid someone for them. Unless the client had it. I mean, if they did, that's even more amazing. I was asked this question a lot. How long is it going to take? Because typically we would get CAD, and they just start. Yeah, but think about later on in the project, and think about that old workflow. It doesn't really work. So model what matters most. Core and shell elements, vertical circulation. I put an extra text to that because the little thing I did with that is I didn't model my stairs. Usually it was one floor plate, and instead I used a shaft. I cut through it. I used symbolic lines to get my stairs from the CAD. That's all I needed. That was my workaround. Unique conditions, floors, obviously, ceilings if they remain. Don't model everything. Model meaningfully. It's very easy to get carried away. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And here's, this is pretty typical of some of the interiors work that I worked on. That's all we need. Usually it was now sometimes it wasn't all gutted out already, so we had to draw existing walls and things of that nature, but those can be done relatively quickly. Finish plans. Woo. Now, I'm hoping someone talks to me after and says they have a different workflow for this because I want to know all the different workflows for it. But this is the one I came up with. They were obsessed with this symbol. These symbols. Now I know some of them are common, but this guy in particular had to show like that. I couldn't do, originally I was like, oh, we'll just do a room schedule, north, east, and oh no. No. I got yelled at for that one. That was not, yeah. So these were actually some of the first things I made because they were incredibly important to the documentation. Here's one of our finished schedules. Now, everything from here is reporting to here. Great. This is what I did. I did a generic annotation family symbol, you put a generic annotation family in the model and it's under symbol. Yeah. Downfall to this, can't use shared parameters. Yeah. But at least you can build parameters into it, and then you can report that. So again, these little legs, these little leaders, that was important. That's another reason I did it this way, is that you can add as many as you want to. So if you're going around a corner, or you have, some kind of complex geometry, you can keep adding these guys. And the way you schedule those, go to schedules, go to note block. Again, it's like generic annotation. Might not be that obvious, I don't know. All these were preloaded all the time, talked about what was important. This is also part of that data collection, because as we found, when we started collecting schedules from other offices, they had other information. But we want one template as much as possible. Now we could, if there's a very good reason to have different information in different schedules, that's fine. We're not trying to tell people they can't have that, but we took a critical eye to it. One lesson learned from this is I had made these instance space the first time I did it, and it wasn't good. because I didn't want this list to be big, but then I found out it's actually better to have that list. And then, because when you start filling these out as instance, it gets kind of crazy because then you have to go find ones if you didn't change them, and yeah, that was a dumb mistake by me. So, typeface, and make sure people know how to name them correctly. It comes back, it goes to naming conventions because the P1? Is it PT1? Or is it PT-1? Or is it P-1? So that sort of thing. And you can have those built into your template too. If you want P1 to be a white paint every time, build that in. I mean, keep that going. Other finishes, floor and ceilings, those were modeled, obviously. Most challenging thing with that was, again, the hatches and getting people to remember to offset the floor. Because we had, structural slab, and then you'd model another floor over it, and it's in the structural slab. So that's just training. I'm sure Dynamo can probably search for FIN at the beginning of the floor name and just be like, pumping them up to a certain level. Nice. Someone make that. Base finishes, again, they were read from the same tag. Miscellaneous schedule. So the miscellaneous finish schedule was for things like glazing, all sorts of different things. And that was maintained in a drafting view, which was there's just another symbol that people filled out the same way as the other finish materials. I just wanted to show an example. Floor finish schedule, again, very similar, getting all this information in there. Another reason to fill all this out is because sometimes we could use the same finish, especially if we had multiple jobs from the same client. And then you can actually use these guys and just copy it into your model, and then it's done, it's scheduled. Woo. Key schedules. Who uses key schedules? Great. If you don't know what key schedules are, they're amazing when you can use them. Basically, you can associate a style or a key to a parameter, and then it will fill out across your schedule like magic. So for things like typical offices and stuff like that. Now, again, this is the type of finish schedule that I got yelled at for. This is actually from an architectural set that I started to work on, so it was okay. But just to give an example, here I have existing. If I drop that key down, it's automatically filling out these things, so I don't got to type them every time or drop them down. One problem we run into with this is on families that use shared parameters, because you can't use shared parameters in key schedules. So the one solution we did, which this came about on our door families, which we got from Aaron, was he actually built, and if anyone's familiar with Aaron Maller's door families, a lot of the stuff is type or instance-based. But now he's actually developing a type-based library also, which essentially just makes this a lot easier for doors. And just to show you, you can create these keys and then you can fill out this information. Easy peasy. And here's how you go to find that. You go to rooms, your schedule keys, room style, and then you can move project parameters over if you have them. Casework, millwork. Does anyone have custom-built casework millwork libraries that they use? Nice. Does anyone not? Oh, well. I'm sure if you don't, you're disappointed with the out-of-the-box stuff. So this was another big one for me, learning how explicit I had to be and literal I had to be with my casework and millwork. So I actually developed my own families. And they have a variety of options. These sort of work like Maller's door families in the sense that you have this box and you have families nested into it. We called them the parent family and the children families, parent and child. The way I developed these was, I had different kicks, for the base that you could put into it. You could swap them out, and all these different doors are separate families that are nested in, and you could load those in. Since we're using Unify, it was very easy to search for those. So we came up with a naming convention that said, I need a double door. Well, that's pretty easy to search for. But then when you get to these guys, oh, I need 4 equal drawers, or I need 4 drawers, but I want one of them to be adjustable. And then also they all had different hardware options. So the 3 common ones that we use were just a regular handle pull, a knob, and a tap pull. Very important, had to be shown in on elevations. Because they had run into issues, at least in Chicago, where they didn't show the hardware right, they didn't get the hardware, even if they labeled it in their millwork details. So that was one of the reasons why they were so concerned about switching their workflow, because they needed this stuff to show accurately. Zoomed in case you guys can't see that. And here's some of the parameters that I had in. You could add shelves, you could adjust the shelves to the heights you wanted. And a lot of these are instance, because I found it easier to work with, but they could easily be swapped to type of parameters. Also overlay versus not an overlay, so this, the gaps would adjust automatically very quickly.
How many cabinets did you have?
So I had one for the base cabinet, I had one for overhead, and one for tall cabinets. And then everything else was just fed in.
And everything else was shared nested?
Yes. No, these were also, you can schedule these. Now, for our corporate interiors, we didn't schedule millwork, but for our lab work, I don't know if they've started doing it, but I built in, they had a specific naming convention that they used, so I built that as a tag, and I built extra parameters down here that we could use for that. Again, built for reuse, built for everyone, not just one type of work. Real quick, I just wanted to show this. Reception desks. Man, I've modeled so many reception desks. Holy crap. This is one case where I did do it in place, just because it was so unique to this client that I knew I wasn't ever going to use it again. But I think it's probably a good idea to have maybe a couple different options of reception desks, even if it's just for schematic design or space plan that you can throw in something that's flexible. But a lot of times the reception desks were very unique for our projects. They weren't bought, they were made. Also helps with documentation. So visualization. This is the second interiors project I worked on at HED. All these graphics are modeled in place, different ceiling type. Actually, this is a family that I built with the slats and everything. This was built from manufacturers' data. These families were all from manufacturers' websites. And then that was the finished product built. So this is sort of when they realized how powerful that new workflow was, because they weren't losing, they were getting what they were seeing in their documentation and in their visualization at the same time. This was actually the first interiors project I ever worked on, first striker. And this was schematic design. So decals all over the place. This thing was custom made. I actually forget what it was called, but we actually ended up not using it. And this was design development. Big change. I actually found a mistake because somebody did post-production and didn't cut. They didn't apply the material. So I just kind of wanted to highlight, all these things that sometimes you do have to do post-production. Like I couldn't figure out how to get the logo across the glass like that. And you probably could do it. You probably could build custom panels and all that kind of stuff, but it was not worth it in the time. Lessons learned. For me, it was rare for other disciplines to be in Revit. I know some of you, mentioned that you were lucky enough to have that. That's great. But we did sometimes model if we had existing information of beams and stuff like that, and we didn't have a structural engineer, because most of the time we didn't have a structural engineer, then we would model it. We would take the time to model and understand the project better. Always be careful what's type versus instance. Also, I wanted to bring up permitting requirements. There have been projects a couple times that's happened where it's in a high-rise, multiple floors, but they're permitting them separately. Don't put those in the same model. For us, it was better to, and this was a, an upfront question of like, okay, how are we permitting this? How are we bidding this? To have those in separate models, because there was certain information we need to show on the title sheet, and we didn't want to change naming conventions for, it should be, I think it was like AOO or something like that for interiors at the time. But that hurt once or twice. And then space planning. When I left, they were still doing a lot of space planning in CAD, and that was because of what I mentioned of the senior designer being able to just like rock and roll. Like she could just fly. She would always give me crap. She's like, oh, I can still do it faster in CAD. I'm like, yeah, but that's because you have like 25 years of wisdom over me who's doing it for the first time. So that was still a challenge. It can be done, and we did do some of it. Usually when I was involved that early, I kind of forced that to sort of happen. Usually with area plans and keeping stuff very light. That's it. Questions? I don't know how am I on time? I think I'm early, aren't I? I knew I was going to go really fast or really slow.
How do you normally control the visibility of the floor finishes? Do you use work sets?
For floor finishes, we actually didn't use work sets for visibility. We actually had the view template set up so that patterns were turned off. That's how we control it. And sometimes, they didn't like, because you would still see the edge of a floor that might be there. But I think they got over that, because we usually don't like to tell people to control visibility with work sets. But that's how we handle it. Anyone else?
So we have a lot of buildings that we work with over and over and over, and is it just a question of getting somebody at the corporate level to get buy-in to take the time and effort to create this building, so we'll have it on file so that we get the 17 space plans and 2 TI build-outs over the course of the next year, we've got it ready to go, or is that something you're doing every time one of those comes in the door that you're taking the time to do that?
So I would say that was one of the hardest things for them sort of to swallow, especially when I brought up like the existing conditions, how long is this going to take you question. Because the way that they even budgeted the projects really didn't take that into account, because they were so used to just getting CAD and just rocking and rolling. But now they usually they build that into the plan, and they say, and this is to that point I brought up earlier about that forethought. So they know now to engage staff and say, how long do you think this is going to take you? And then they sort of go about it from there. But yeah, there was always someone that was building those existing conditions beforehand. And usually it happened either during space planning or right afterwards, even if the project didn't kick off like immediately.
Yeah, I'm really.
So you mentioned architectural templates.
LBO. It's acquired by PE.
I don't think I did. Some people might have, but I'm not sure.
It's just mild.
Right.
So you're an LA?
And this is something that's going on there now, that they're bringing the interiors template into the architecture template, because they are. Also, what was going on when I was there is they wanted to work more closely together, because traditionally they had been these two separate departments and they weren't collaborating as much as they wanted to. But then this actually allowed them, because the staff that was on corporate interiors projects didn't know how to work on the architecture Revit models because they didn't have the training, they didn't have the knowledge of how to do it. But now they're intermingling a lot more, especially on like housing projects and I think actually like every project now.
You know,
No. PW
Right.
is downtown near the library, right next to where Harley Ellis is.
Anybody else?